Hello, winners, and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Wrong Button podcast, where we talk most things video games and all things nerd. I am once again joined by the remaster himself, Mr. Mark Quigles.
Hello, I am Mr. Mark Quigles.
How are you doing today, Mark?
I am doing all right. How have you been?
I am doing good. We just finished up some house hunting or neighborhood hunting, the missus and I, so we
Ooh,
are back in time for the podcast. But the
that's
last
good.
time you were, thank you. The last time you were on, we discussed um,
It was like the
e-
console wars and stuff.
console wars, the E3 alikes,
hmm
and then the loss of exclusivity.
Yeah.
And you made up a point. You had a very fantastic, nuanced opinion on it, which is something that
hmm
I've latched onto, which was, hey, if more people get to play this great game, why would you say no to that? Why would
Yeah.
you kind of gatekeep that? Um, but you'd also brought up a spectacular idea for um, this age that we're kind of in of
hmm
definitive editions, remasters, remakes, re-ups, um, redo, reboots,
Yep.
and I was hoping to get your opinion on this I'm not just going to say it's a new genre for video games. Like it's
Like
been
the new
books have
practice.
yeah, books have been reprinted.
hmm
Star Wars has gotten special editions,
hmm
and Lord of the Rings has like the uncut, and DC now has Snyder cuts.
Yep.
Whatever that means.
Apparently, it makes films good. So I guess if that's the case, then go ahead. I'm not really much of a DC guy, so I'm just basic Marvel boy over here.
I understand that completely. We're gonna do a quick health check. Is your mic plugged in?
My
It's
mic
cut
is
out a
in
couple
fact.
times.
It has. Oh my god. Do I have to like? Do I have to like really get close in on the mic? Or do I just have to be louder? I don't know.
Okay, it's coming in a little bit chop. Maybe it could be coming in over here, and then it could be picking you up on that end. So I
Mhm.
will go with that. If it doesn't work, I might grab you another weekend,
Okay.
and I'll figure it out.
Alrighty.
But remasters and remakes, would you say that that's been more prevalent with the? I feel like it's mostly been seen with the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation.
I'd say it's a lot more common nowadays than it was like in previous gens, like PS2, PS3, Xbox, and 64 and all that. Like, you see it a lot more now just because I think games have a lot more history now. And because you can't just like bring those old games to the newest platform in most cases, because platform like cross compatibility or backwards compatibility, whatever you want to call it, that tends to be taken for granted, I think. So I think like I'm absolutely for like older games getting the port treatment or remake treatment or whatever else just on these newer systems, just so that way people actually like get a chance to play what they want, you know.
And and with a lot of that, like I completely agree, and it's one of those things. I think part of it has to do with the fact that I think backwards compatibility for the most part is dead, and we will
Mm-hmm.
never truly see that again like we did from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3 or even PS1 to PS2.
Yeah,
Um,
I think they are like
and I
trying
know a lot of
to
that is
rectify
technology. Like
that with,
technology is getting so good.
yeah, but like I do think they are kind of trying to rectify that since Xbox Series X and PS5, most games from PS4 and Xbox One, those can be just transferred over, like even with like cross
Hmm.
saving and everything. That's something I absolutely support. Uh, Unfortunately, like Nintendo kind of like took a step back because like with the Switch, you can't have like the older games on the Switch now unless like you pay for them again, which I'm not that big on. But at least at least the Wii U had it, but oh well.
And I mean, personally for myself, like I know that there are some limitations, and I know like Stadia being dead, just to be topical for about 30 seconds,
Yeah.
with the streaming service. And one thing I loved actually was PlayStation Now. Back in the day, it used to be that you could
Hmm.
purchase games and just be like, "I'm going to play this game or rent this game for 30 days," and now it's you have to kind of do it as the package. Um,
Hmm.
but the Xbox Gold, PlayStation Now, giving you the ability to play those a lot of those older games. Um, but I think the much loved part now, and what we can really delve into, is the fact that people now are appreciating games of old and like, you know what I miss this great game, and it would be great to see it
Hmm.
kind of given a new light or new life.
Ooh.
um the big one, or the biggest one that comes to me, and that I know for you, you're just getting into it, um was kind of like Yakuza, because Yakuza
Hmm.
0, a small Let's Play channel, played Yakuza 0, played like Yakuza 4 or something else, and helped revitalize this over here. Um,
Hmm.
and now we have Yakuza that came out over here, Yakuza 0, which came up to the other ones, Yakuza Kiwami and Kiwami 2, both remakes
Yep.
of the original game. So I think it's really exciting to see this. Um, if you had to categorize, because I know we said this, we're going to give everyone the definitive, like there's going to be
Yes.
nothing else other than what we say for this on this podcast.
Hmm.
If you had to classify, by types, you have remakes, re-releases, reimaginings, reboots.
There's
Um,
like a category for
go ahead.
every day of the week at this point. It's kind of
Is it a
ridiculous.
port up? Yeah, and it's
What
one of
are
those things.
you?
Like, do you? I guess we'll start. How do you feel about just straight up HD one for one re-releases, where maybe they kind of do the Disney thing where they upscale it for newer TVs and maybe smooth it out a little bit? How are you with games like that?
I think those are good. I do kind of wish that for older games that are used to being shown on like a CRT, there would be just sort of a setting to just be able to put a CRT filter just on your screen, just so that way the game actually looks like how it did back in the day, which like playing through like a PS1
If
game like in HD, you just kind
Mhm.
of notice like all the smoothness and whatnot. Like I played like Mega Man X4 for the first time like on my Switch, and it was just like you had this one like option of just like CRT filter or smooth pixels, and smooth pixels looked ugly. Like I think having it just upscaled to HD, that's fine, but please for the love of God, let us have a filter to just let us have that old time look essentially, because I like old time looks.
I
Anyway.
want the CRT filter only if my game turns off and my screen kind of glows green for a couple moments.
Yeah.
Like, you know, those old tube televisions where you turn, like, I'm not watching TV when I'm not supposed to be, and it's still like green and staticky. I want the sound effect to play, and I
Mhm.
want it to like be kind of green.
Oh, absolutely. And I just want like for that CRT filter when I turn the game off, just for a couple seconds, you just see like the green like channel 3 like logo just in the corner of your TV screen.
I'd be here
Just to
for
date
that.
myself.
Um, no, it's one of those things where like, and if if whenever you turn the game on, it said like video one or like input something up there, just that's very classic with that old, almost digital style font, but not as clean as it is nowadays.
Mhm.
Now, so I guess my other question here, that before we really delve into like remakes that we're like super excited about versus maybe ones less so, um, I'm gonna ask the question of pricing. So, I know, one of the biggest ones I've seen complaints on, and I'm sorry to like hit Nintendo for this, is Legend of Zelda, um,
Mhm.
Link's Awakening, right?
Right. And then
My
like not to date this recording, but like just a couple days ago, you know.
The Bowser's Fury game.
No, not Bowser's Fury, from the Nintendo Direct that happened like 2 days ago. The announcement for Skyward Sword HD.
Oh, that's going to be another fantastic one. So I feel like
Yep.
Skyward Sword might get a little bit of a pass, because they're going to probably make it with controller support and not like you have to do all the swiping, and
Yeah.
slashing with the nunchucks. But the key thing here is let's look at we're going to look at so we'll look at the Legend of Zelda uptick from Link's Awakening to
Hmm.
Link's Awakening for the Switch, and then let's pick another game. Let's look at Okami HD.
Hmm.
I think Okami HD came out at like $49.99, and
Hmm.
all it was a straight up port, and here's some cleanup.
Yeah.
Nothing was added. They might have been like, hey, you have all the costumes unlocked, but
Hmm.
it was Okami. Now Okami's a great game, and they put it out on the uh, on the
It was like
PlayStation, and I think
PS4
yeah, and
and
Xbox, and I think
yeah,
Switch.
maybe Steam. No, Switch.
Yeah.
I think came later. I would
Okay,
know because
but
that
it
is
was
when. Yeah.
$49.99 for that game. And I bought it because one, I was very excited to play this game that I had slept on as a child.
Same
Um,
here.
but then I look at a game like Link's Awakening, where yes, it's an HD port, but and all they really had to do was like they already had where everything was. They didn't have to redesign the game from the ground up, but they gave that game personality and charm and changed
Oh
enough of
yeah.
it so it was modernized.
Hmm.
How do you feel about the pricing of a an HD re-release?
I think it is kind of weird. It's kind of a weird thing to like actually like put in front of you just because you have certain like entire collections like a lot one that's thrown around like all the time is the Metal Gear Solid HD collection where it's just like you get so many like games just for like $50 and it's like oh my god, oh, of course I'm gonna like grab that even if I don't really care that much about Metal Gear because like having like the entire series just under one roof, that's dope. Same thing with like Kingdom Hearts, like you get the 1.5 plus 2.5 collection, that's like four games and like two movies just in one thing. Even if it's just $60, like my god, like Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 alone are just worth that for me. But like you get something like Skyward Sword HD, which right now all we know about it is that there's going to be like a button only mode, aka left-handed mode. I can make that joke. I'm left-handed. Uh, and like kind of upscaled graphics a little bit, and that's going to be $60. I I like Legend of Zelda, so obviously I'm going to be getting the Zelda collection, but man, that $60 price tag does kind of hurt a little bit. And
Hmm.
it's just kind of like Nintendo, you're huge right now. You have like 80 million like Switch units sold. I feel like you can just make this like $30 a little bit. That'll be fine. You'll still make a lot of money
Right.
or something.
You're paying for the portability. You know that's what it is. You're paying for the portability.
Yeah. Yeah, you are paying for portability. But then
Uh,
even then, just looking back at like Kingdom Hearts, it's like, man, I get all of this. It's all on one disc and it's just one
mhm.
purchase for me and it's and I think like at launch it was also 60. So it's like, oh man, I can just like slip this in and I get some really good games that I can just play and enjoy. So it's like, huh.
Now, when you say it like that for a collection, because I was going to bring up collections. I'm actually I'm staring at the Borderlands Handsome collection, which I think is
Mhm,
like 1 and 2, or the prequel like 2.5, whatever, however breaks down. I still haven't finished it
mhm,
yet. But I was looking at that, and I'm actually looking at the Devil May Cry collection because I think that came out, which was 1, 2, and 3,
mhm,
at $30. And personally, for a chance to go back and play 3, which is the one I'm told like just play 3,
mhm,
watch something on 1 and 2, but play 3,
mhm,
was fantastic. Now, um, those games came in at a great price, but seeing as you brought up this idea of Skyward Sword just kind of being an uptick and getting charged full price, do you consider Game of the Year editions or definitive editions where it's like, okay, maybe it came out 6, 8 months later,
mhm.
but it now has all the DLC or it has its own exclusivity to it. but they're still going to charge you full price. Do you think that that's something that's fair, or do you think that that's something that's a bit of a gouging?
I I don't know that I think is like case by case basis, because if it's like I can get the base game for like $20, but the
Mhm.
definitive edition that just has all the DLC is like $60, but the DLC is only like another 20, then it's like, I may as well just like get the original. Who cares about the game of the year sticker that's on
Mhm.
the definitive version? uh Buy the DLC separately, or just wait until I finish the base game and then buy the DLC if I really like the game, or if like the DLC just makes the base game just that much better. uh it's really just a case by case basis for me. But I've also seen instances where it's just like, and again, this is probably like another dig on Nintendo a little bit, because Pokemon Sword and Shield had DLC, and then they made
Mhm.
a physical release of Sword and Shield with the DLC, and it's just the same price of getting the base game plus the DLC. And it's just like uglier box art, essentially, is
It
what
feels
you're
like
paying
Ultra Sun
for.
and Ultra Moon, where it felt like you got the base game. It was the base game you'd played, but you got DLC just to rebuy the base game.
Yeah.
Um,
Although at least with Sword and Shield, you didn't have to replay through the base game in order to get to the DLC, which
mhm.
is a godsend. Please keep doing that, Game Freak, if you're listening.
Please, Game Freak. Your only hope, because I was thinking about that, and part of what that brought that up is, um, I actually really fell in love with Devil May Cry. Talking about the collection, I got four
Hmm.
special edition because it was on sale on Xbox, but five came out, and
Hmm.
five came out has all these characters. And if I'm not mistaken, in order to get Virgil, you have to re-buy the special edition of the game,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
I
I can't just be like, well, let me play this and then get this DLC if I want to play as Virgil for 15, 20
Mhm.
bucks. No, spend another 60 to get the game you have and this DLC.
Yeah, because like at that point, I would just like wait for a sale for it to just drop in price like 4 years from now to like $10, and then I'm just like,
Mhm.
I'll cop that. I do think that some of the stuff that's in five special edition was just made DLC for regular base five. So like, I think
Mhm.
like the big one was just like Virgil being playable. I think you can just like buy that for like $5, which is good. And I think that was like a
Mhm.
smart move on Capcom. But I think locking certain content behind the definitive Game of the Year edition or whatever, that's kind of a scum move. I am someone who prefers to buy his game and buy his DLC like kind of afterward, and then just have it all just in
Mhm.
one complete package, just so that way I can play it and just not have to worry about anything in the future, essentially. Like a I'm someone who is a scumbag and buys season passes for DLC before we even know what's in them.
No, I guess for me, like the season pass, like I only do that for like multiplayer games, not necessarily for um
Mm-hmm.
too many single player. Like I've done it for Clancy, and I think that's kind of done for me. Is I've been burned by Ubisoft a few times. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so we've gotten the prices out of the way now. What we've talked about here have kind of been like one for one. So we've talked about you talked about the Metal Gear Solid. You talked about Kingdom Hearts. And I've talked about Devil May Cry, where and Okami, where it's like here's this game. Here's
Mm-hmm.
this game now playable on your new consoles with some tweaks to it, maybe quality of life, but for the most part, here's that game that you know and
Mm-hmm.
love.
Yes.
Um, and right now, I think that the new thing that's been incredibly successful, coming out of Japan, especially coming from both the Resident Evil 2 remake, 3
Oh
remake,
yeah.
as well as Final Fantasy 7 remake,
Mm-hmm.
um, where it's the game that you love, but they've modernized it for modern audiences. They've given you quality of life,
Oh
but
yeah.
in doing so, and I feel like both of these companies knew that was if they quality of life and just said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, here's Resident Evil 2. it feels almost exactly the same. Like it's beat for beat. All we did was completely update this and giving you quality of life things. I think that game would have been so. It'd have been like, hey, it's this great game, but it would have been so
Mhm.
trivialized.
Right.
And then looking at Final Fantasy 7, I think if they would have
Mhm.
just like upscaled it completely without modernizing it, a lot of people today wouldn't understand. Like someone who played the game would get it, but the game wouldn't
Right.
translate as well.
For sure. Like, I do really like the whole. I'm just gonna call them reimagining stuff like Final Fantasy VII Remake, freaking Resident Evil 2 and 3, uh, Fire Emblem Echoes comes to mind as well because that like changed a lot of stuff from Fire Emblem Gaiden. I
Hmm.
honestly think those are kind of more of the interesting remakes because like whenever I see a remake, I'm just like, okay, what's gonna change from the original here? Because I can deal with older looking graphics. I said this before, but I like the look of older games. I am a sucker for
Hmm.
pixel art. I'm part of the problem, I know. Uh, but show me something that I can't do in the older games that I can do in these remakes because that's what I'm going to be looking for. Or show me something that I really just did not like about the original games that was just changed or just removed entirely from these newer things. So I it's a tough line to walk because on the one hand you want to be loyal to the original, but at the same time you kind of have to justify to the older fans why you would want to get this remake of a game that you already have. So just having something like that, just having even like the slightest of changes that make the game completely different essentially,
Hmm.
I think that is just what makes or breaks a remake partially.
Hmm. Now, how do you feel? Because I know you said you're sucker for pixel art, older games here. Uh, Now, like pixel art, I've started to like see the light on. I'm still like looking for more. Even games with just simple sprites. Freedom Planet's a good one that comes to mind. Shovel
Yes, I
Knight
love that.
has fantastic pixel art. They do
Oh, the best
so
game.
much with that game. Yeah, I'm actually playing Cyber Shadow, Cyber Ninja,
Ooh, I
the
need
new
to.
one that's been produced by Yacht Club Games, which is
Yes.
also pixel based.
Mhm.
Now, I think with Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy VII, as well as Resident Evil, the key difference here is like if you go back and play, um, I would say Final Fantasy like 1 to 4,
Mhm.
where it was, hey, here's this gorgeous pixel art. It's very simple, and I think
Mhm.
nowadays like I would maybe switch out the sprites, give them some more personality because we can do that. But Final
Yes.
Fantasy VII in particular, um, going back to that game, it was such I want to call that game is the epitome of awkward teenage years
Mhm.
of like video games because the character's like, here's this gorgeous character, and then you go back and like when you
Mhm.
say Final Fantasy VII to me, I'm like, oh, it looks like Advent Children. And then you if you showed me what Final Fantasy VII looked like, because I saw the fan art of Cloud, the art of Cloud, and then I watched Final
Mhm.
Fantasy VII get played, and I was like, who has been lying to me about what this game is? The
Mhm.
game
With
might be
like,
good, but if
mhm. Just like how awkward it looks, just like with
Mhm.
the 3D art, just on the 2D background, it just kind of screams, "Hey, this is from the PS1 and N64 era, where we
Mhm.
were still trying to figure out how 3D polygons work." Essentially,
Yeah, like to me, but like Final Fantasy VII remake to me is one. Let's give fans like let's.
Mhm.
It feels like they're now saying let's tell the story in a more concrete way because we have the ability. Um,
Absolutely.
and I have to say like personally, I'm like, oh, that's great. Because I've heard and I've watched few Let's Plays of it, and there are some points in Final Fantasy VII where it's like, one, I don't think Barrett would translate as well as he did, and the new Barrett, from what I hear, is like, hey, if you're younger and you're trying to get your kid into Final Fantasy, like this is a great game to now come in on because it's a fun baseline reset.
Oh, for sure. He's much. I honestly like a lot of the characters in 7 remake a lot more than I did in 7 because I didn't really think that much of characters like Barrett or Tifa or like even Aerith or whatever. I think like the only
Mhm.
character that I kind of like better in the original 7 compared to 7 remake is Sephiroth. And that's really just because there's creative changes that Tetsuya Nomura took with Sephiroth. It looks like that just I don't know. I don't like it as well as how it happened in original 7, but that could change since 7 remake isn't technically done kind of.
Uh, that's gonna be the next 20 years when we talk about Final Fantasy VII remake as we're
Mhm.
on game 8. Final Fantasy VII remake part 8. Now there's one other thing that's really come to mind here with this. And I'm going to steer. We kind of touched on it here, which is continuity, because Final Fantasy VII
Mhm.
jumped around a lot, and I don't know if you're a Resident Evil fan, but the Resident Evil games um, don't make a lot of sense.
Right. I have a passing knowledge of Resident Evil. So I know that the remake of 2 changed like quite a bit, but for what it looks like it's quite a bit for the better. And then
Hmm.
3 kind of changed a few things, but for the worse from what I understand. I'm not sure. And then
Three,
oh, go ahead.
three didn't fix, like, there's still some plot points in like three, I think, that happen, or in two, where it's like a vial falls and Wesker for whatever reason is like in the chamber below, and that's how like Wesker finds Ada, and there are some weird things about that, like all the
Mm,
way around, and I don't even think that like they explained it. Like Claire uses a crane to beat a monster, which technically happens before Leon does it, but then the crane's still on the other side. But if they fought the monster where they said they fought the monster, it doesn't always line up, and I think they did more that way there to make it happen. How do
right.
you feel though about a remake going like, okay, this game's been a long running franchise, people loved this one, and them
Mhm,
taking, like, I think with two especially, it was the risk of, you know what, guys, we're going to give you the game that you deserve, but we got to make some changes for it. And I think
mhm.
they kept a lot of those under wraps. How do you feel about a remake being a way to clean up maybe continuity errors or just some like real plot holes that are like, none of this makes sense?
I've always kind of assumed that when when you get a remake of a game just in a long running series, that remake just kind of replaces in a timeline sense the continuity of that series essentially. Like for example with Metroid, we have the first 2 games remade. So instead of Metroid 1 being what happens canonically, it's instead Metroid Zero Mission, and then instead of Metroid 2, it's Metroid Samus Returns. That's what ends up happening. So I kind of just assume that is just always the case, but I can understand why it wouldn't always be the case since sometimes like remakes just don't end up being what people want them to. So it's like, okay, well, then we're just not going to consider it canon or something along the lines of, oh, well, Remake did this thing differently. So we can't really have it just the way that the remake did it. So we're just going to assume like how the original did it was canon. And that's just how you get into some messy sort of interpretations. I think so long as you just follow the plot almost beat for beat, changing just what doesn't work to something that does work, I think that's just fine, honestly.
Mhm.
It again, it's like a huge case by case basis for me. I think certain remakes just do that better. I I just mentioned Metroid, but also stuff like Fire Emblem. trying to think of others. I can't really look at my shelf right now because then I would not be looking into my mic. But basically, just I think just having, I don't know. I don't really look at continuity that much, but for the few franchises where I actually do care about it a little bit, I do prefer that when part of it gets remade, that either it's kept alone or something that's like easily fixable and stitched togetherable
Mhm.
that can just work. Hmm, I think like again, probably the best example for me would have been like Fire Emblem Echoes, because that game just had originally just a bare bones plot of guy saves the girl, but then Echoes just added in so much more characterization to everything that happened.
Mhm.
So that actually worked just way, honestly, just way better, to the point where everybody, myself included, just say, look, just play Fire Emblem Echoes. You don't really need to play Gaiden now. So I don't know. From a story standpoint, it's a tough thing to definitively call. It's mostly just a case by case basis. So I think just having, especially since years ago, people didn't really look at a game story with that much of a critical eye because they had to be much simpler until like maybe like the late SNES days with something like Chrono Trigger came along.
Mhm.
But like now you can just like get into games that just have so many moving parts about them that it is kind of enticing to have that. Yes, let's have all these gears running at their own speed, at like their own pace, essentially at their own way, and we can just have all that work somehow. Which I think that's something that Fire Emblem actually does pretty well. And I know certain things in 7 Remake work really well. I point directly to Jesse and Biggs from 7 Remake, because they were like nothing characters that I don't even think had names in the original 7. But in the remake, they're really good characters that I honestly just smile whenever I see them. So,
I think they were named because like Barrett calls them out by name, like in the beginning and then on the train sequence. But if I'm not mistaken, you're right. Like after that, they die in the reactor or what have you, and that's
mhm.
it. Like that's like
Yeah,
they don't have any points with that. Now to go on with remake and to go back, you I think you've recently beaten Yakuza Like a Dragon.
I'm still playing through Yakuza Like a Dragon. Admittedly, I've basically, ever since I started that game, just a bunch of other games just kind of came out, and I bought Rapid Fire essentially.
Hmm.
So I haven't been able to like get back to it, but I do actually want to beat Yakuza Like a Dragon because it is just so freaking good. It's such a good game.
And here's the one thing that I love about that game, and I'll explain how it comes in. To me, Yakuza Like a Dragon, we talked about like reimagines, continuity errors, and fixing things.
Hmm.
To me, Like a Dragon is the reboot for the Yakuza franchise. Um,
Yes.
Ichiban is a direct, like he is almost exact opposites from Kiryu. Kiryu is like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna run in and solve issues with my fists. He's not a yakuza. Don't, why are you going in and beating up the people and like crippling the people who are need to pay us money? Like that, they're not going to pay us money now because they can't. um and there's this really big difference where Ichiban, in the first couple things when he's doing the collection route, you can tell that he's like, nope, I understand how this business works.
Mhm.
um Wears a bit of an he wears an off, like a reverse colored suit that Kiryu wears. And they play this game, and it plays like a traditional JRPG, where a lot of people
Mhm.
will say that Yakuza is a JRPG. It just has like some character action elements because you can have combos, you can have moves.
Yep.
um, and then the same
It's
thing
my kind of
happened.
JRPG.
This one is like your kind of JRPG. Whereas like look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, they took Remake where it was like you can I think play that game exactly like a JRPG, where
Hmm.
it's you select attack, you attack the part, what have you. Um, and now Yakuza Like a Dragon came out, which in Japan is Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon.
Yep.
Um, but it is it's a pretty soft reboot to the franchise because it happens like when Kiryu's in jail, so it's happening at like the same time as part of one is, or Kiwami is for if anyone hasn't played the first game. Um, how do you feel about that? Like I know we said continuity and fixing that, but bringing this kind of takes Yakuza back to a foundational level with JRPGs, but Final Fantasy VII did it in reverse where they modernized it. What are your thoughts on changing something so fundamental about a game in its reboot or its reimagining and remake form?
I think honestly, I think those are like probably the most interesting kind of changes because first of all, it's something that's way more immediate when it hits you because you can tell when something's like trying to be like a JRPG, like Yakuza 7 versus I've seen like gameplay footage of like Yakuza Kiwami and 0 and 6 and whatnot. And the entire look and feel that you get from even just watching both games is just so massively different just immediately. So it's like, okay, I probably, even if you're not somebody who really likes JRPGs that much or turn based combat or action commands or what have you, Yakuza 7 will immediately look different from something like Yakuza 0 because other than that, then you basically just have, hey, there's a new Yakuza game. It just doesn't have Kiryu in it, which fine if that's what you want, but certain people might like grow tired from that formula, so they'll go to something like Yakuza 7. Even if they're probably somebody who doesn't play that many JRPGs. In 7 Remake's case, it's just sort of a case of it feels sort of like what Square has been doing with Final Fantasy VII to the point where it feels like this is how we would make Final Fantasy VII for the first time if it was made today and not back in the 90s, essentially. It's just because you can basically turn off the turn-based combat and just go with a full-fledged like action game almost. You still have to basically utilize stuff like your special commands and your magic and whatnot, but it's much more like action heavy, sort of like, again, making the comparison to Kingdom Hearts, but a little bit like that, which I think gives older fans a lot more justification to get Final Fantasy VII Remake, even if it's just like, oh, well, I was hoping for something more one to one. Well, okay, it's not going to be the old game, but at the very least, it's going
Mhm.
to be something mostly new. So that way you can just treat it like a new game instead. That's at least how I see it. But I know certain decisions, I know definitely, at least within 7 Remake, there were certain decisions that people were not keen on. I don't think like the combat was like necessarily one of them. Certain people probably don't like it, but I'm personally just all for it, essentially.
Mhm.
But that's just sort of my take on it. There's no wrong way about it. There's like 100 ways to reimagine an entire game and have it turn out good.
And that's actually one of the reasons I want to get your opinion. Like I know, for me, like I've gotten into like the character action, the heavy combos. So the mainline Yakuza franchise for me is super where I like it because I like being able to like upgrade my character, get more combos, do more damage, like juggles, things like that. So
Mhm.
even Final Fantasy VII Remake, for me, because you have some of that ability in there, I'm like, oh, this will be really exciting to do. as the game goes on, because it brings someone like me who, like, maybe I don't like the turn based, like I like a JRPG when it's Pokemon, or I would
Mhm.
probably love Final Fantasy like on a long car ride or on a plane trip where it's like, hey, wander through this world. Final Fantasy 9 like was my favorite one to play, and like playing that on the go to me was always very enjoyable.
Yep,
Because you could sit down for a second, I could walk away, come back to it like you can with Pokemon. Whereas I
definitely.
feel um sometimes with like a character action game, like if you put it down for too long, you come back and you're like, I have to go relearn all my combos and how things work again.
Yep.
um Now I guess the thing is, to go on here, I know a lot of times uh these remakes are kind of litmus tests
Mhm.
for, hey, would you buy this franchise again? Would you kind of play this? I That's kind of how I felt with the Splinter Cell remake or trilogy
Mhm.
that came out for PlayStation 3, Zone of the Enders and Zone of the Enders 2, which came out twice,
Yep.
once for the PlayStation 3 and then again for the PlayStation 4. I still don't have a Zone of the Enders 3 announcement or any other game that's like, hey, it's not Zone of Enders because Kojima and Konami aren't together, but it's Zone of Enders.
Right.
Um, do you have any remakes that are you're hoping like lead to a new entry in this franchise, a spiritual successor, or anything like that?
Honestly, is terms of like remakes to just sort of revitalize a certain franchise, I think probably one of them, admittedly, would probably be Ace Attorney. As weird as that sounds, because we do have like the Ace Attorney like remake trilogy essentially
Mhm.
on everything. I'm hoping that basically sort of sparks something to just get us more remakes or even something like a reboot of Ace Attorney, just because I think, as much as I like the characters in Ace Attorney, there are way too many to keep track of now, that I think just going back to basics would probably be best for that franchise. What else? Freaking. Uh, Not necessarily. I guess also probably Mega Man X, just because I really like the first Mega Man X, and I like Mega Man X4 and a few of the other Mega Man X games, and I do have Mega Man X collection. So I am hoping we get a Mega Man X9. We got a Mega Man 11 because the classic collection like
Mhm.
sold really really well just across everything. So I'm hoping that Capcom does the same thing with both Ace Attorney and Mega Man. So cross your fingers please and pray for me.
um, Now, with like remakes and talking about that, if let's say they took a beloved franchise, because I know, I was actually watching Matt McMuscle did a what happened on Mega Man
Ooh.
X8, I think it was, where they introduced like Axel, and like
Oh, that's
X was like
X7.
a
Yeah,
was
I
it
haven't
X7?
watched that. Yeah, I haven't watched that specific episode of What Happened, but yeah, X7 is the
It's
one that was just dragged through the mud because oh no.
it's a very good episode, but it made me think, if so, let's say they said, hey, we're gonna give you another Mega Man X or another Mega Man game. Would you be unhappy if they said, hey, we're gonna give you the character, it's gonna be X that you loved, but
Mhm.
we're gonna like kind of change the story, we're gonna maybe give them a new origin, um just so that way they could tell like a fresh story with this character, because it's like, yeah, you love this character, let's change that. Do you think that that's something that should be like feasible?
I hmm, cuz like it's interesting because on the one hand, I think honestly a reboot for Mega Man X just as a series would probably be for the best, just to start from scratch. And again, you could definitely have that whole, we're going to give X a new backstory, we're going to give Zero and Sigma new backstories and whatnot, and that could lead to potentially a better written uh, plot for Mega Man X. On the other
Mhm.
hand, X is kind of pretty like, it's not completely reliant on like its lore from like game to game to game, but it is more so lore heavy than like the classic Mega Man series, which that's not really hard to do, but whatever. Um, I think I think having like a Mega Man X reboot, just like, and even if you still want to call it Mega Man X9, I think that's just kind of fine by me. Just so long as it's not sort of like we're continuing X's story and then it's like, nope, reboot button, and then it's like, this is X. He's a completely new robot. He's a maverick hunter, whatever. It's just like, eh. If it makes sense, I'd either want them to go whole ham on reboot or try to fix the story, or at least like kind of like give a wink to the audience like, yeah, we know this is kind of edgy and ridiculous by X standards, but we just want to do this cool thing. Let us do it.
Because it's like, because when you say that, it's like, I know that there's the fan theory that at the end of whatever the final Mega Man game was before X came out, Mega Man kills Dr. Wily, which causes Mega Man to die, which causes X to awaken. If I'm not mistaken, is how I've seen that as like a fan theory. So I
I
wouldn't like.
think
Would
I
you
know what
mind
you're
it
talking
if they like, let's said, say again?
I think I know what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I think I've heard of it before. It's just been a while since I've heard that theory. It's weird,
I I
but
I thought it was like Aaron's theory from oh god, what is it? Aaron from Game Grumps.
sequelitis.
Sequelitis. I thought sequelitis was kind of what covered it. Um,
Hmm.
I
Trying
could
to
be mixing it
remember.
up with like a deep dive that I did one time. Um, but I some like if they like maybe confirm some fan theories or like X-nayed some. I didn't know if like that to you would be. It sounds like for the most part you're like if it's not changing like don't like run these characters like be like here's just this completely new like then just give me a new character. It's like if you want
Hmm.
to give me a character that I love and say we're going to fix some things, we're going to make some things better, that's fine. um
Hmm.
but
I
maybe
think
not.
like if you're gonna confirm a fan theory, just so long as you do it in a way that would basically just make sense, which honestly fan theories already like do half the work for you, because it's like, okay, X awaken X woke up because Mega Man actually like killed someone and went haywire, which meant he went maverick or something. So now X had to get woken up and basically track down the original Mega Man. I think having that just like, and then it completely makes sense because X
Mhm,
hunts Mavericks and he was also built by Dr. Light to do just that. And the Mavericks are all robots, so who cares if they die?
mhm.
Uh, just having that, like, fans have already done the work for you. You may as well just be like, yoink, essentially, just to confirm it. And then fans will just go, oh my God, it's actually true. I do think it might
I
be a
almost want
little
to
bit
know.
scummy just because it's like, we're just going to take the lazy way out of writing. But I do think you still have to put in a little bit of effort in order to earn that whole theory confirmed moment with the fans. So, yeah.
The and kind of like to play off of that, like I almost want to know now, like what if you just said, well, Mega Man, killed Dr. Wily and then became Sigma, and just like, nope, he has all of Mega Man's powers from the first games, but X now has to take him on and re-earn his powers and fight his predecessor. It'd be just like a
Mhm.
fun joke. And I guess the final thing, because we're getting down to the last couple minutes here, um, let's talk about the remaster naming issue that I think
Oh
plagues
yeah.
plagues this. The biggest offenders for me, I've got three, and they happen to be games that I absolutely adore.
Hmm.
For me, it's Darksiders, the War Master, and the Definitive Edition, and then a game that came out last year, and it was my favorite RPG on the PlayStation 3 console was Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, and the
Hmm.
fact that they said Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning, and I,
Mm. Yeah, I'm not that huge on franchises that use re something instead of just saying remake or remaster. Thank God Final Fantasy VII Remake is just called that. Because if it was
It is an
called,
actual remake.
because like I would have hated to go through this entire episode just going in Final Fantasy VII rematerialized.
Oh.
That would have I would have been like, we are changing what this episode is all about.
All I'm thinking is like any like terrible remake names for like Final Fantasy VII be like Final Fantasy VII, the Re-Fantasy, or
Mm,
trying to get like the seven as the R somehow, like
mm.
the seven make, or I don't know how you would do it, but like just
I mean, the writer for the Kingdom Hearts series is the one who's behind the 7 remake. So don't
uh,
test him. Because the last time we tested him, we got like you've seen like all the ridiculous names for Kingdom Hearts games where if you were an outsider looking in, you'd be like 358 over 2 days. That's fake. That's some cringy fan fiction. It's like, no, that's a real freaking game.
Birth by Sleep, Dream Drop Distance for the 3DS,
Melody of Memory.
Melody of Memory, Kingdom Hearts 2.8. By the way, we're doing a Kingdom Hearts playthrough, everyone. And I
Oh yeah,
do
I
the
saw
joke of we finally hit Kingdom Hearts 3 11 episodes into this.
that.
Um,
Yeah, because they do Kingdom Hearts 2.9. I do kind of like how Kingdom Hearts is kind of tongue in cheek with like, yeah, we know our naming convention is ridiculous. What honestly what honestly cracks me up the most is just hearing all the justification for like the different like 2.8, 0.2, or
yeah.
whatever. Because it's just like, oh man, people at Square Enix are not paid enough for
And
this.
and now I guess the final thing would be, and this would be the question for like both of us would be if you could have you said it was the Ace Attorney game.
Mhm.
Um, Now I want to pose a question. Did you ever play any of the? You're a big JRPG fan, right?
Yes.
Now let's say, would you be happy with? Because you said you're big into Dragon Quest, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
I I do really like Dragon Quest. I've been playing 11 and 8. I think those are probably my two favorite ones, which I don't really think that's even all that unpopular, but I've been playing quite a bit of both of those. I want to get into like the older ones, specifically 4, 5 and 6, but they're ridiculously expensive. So, I have to
Now,
basically beg
are
Daddy Square Enix for a remake or some kind of re-release.
are those Dragon Quest games, the older ones there, are they like 8-bit, or are they like the pixel art
Mhm.
ones?
They are. So like
Would
yeah, go ahead.
If you could have like a dream remake of those, because like you're saying that and I'm like, I would love to see a remake of those. It could be one for one, but
Mhm.
give them modern pixel art. Like be like, hey, Yacht Club, can you please do all the pixel art for my Dragon Quest game?
Ooh, or
um
like, oh man, what's the team that did Octopath Traveler? Because they would probably do really good with like a Dragon Quest 4 through 6 remake. That would probably, I don't know.
go. Do you have, other than Ace Attorney, do you have any one game, like we've done the reboot, do you have
Mhm.
any one game that you would like to see remade, like just even if it was just for you, like I want this one game remade, and I will not ask for another remake until a game supersedes that one.
The two that spring to mind, one would be Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, because that's the fourth Fire Emblem game, and it has never made its way outside of Japan except for like fan translations. But I kind of want to see that remade in the Three Houses engine, just because I feel like a lot of elements from the fourth game would really work well in the Three Houses engine. And then the other one is probably the one that your comments will probably get like a lot. They'll be in a war over this, but I think probably my dream remake is Sonic Adventure 1 because
Say one
I
more time. I'm
freaking
sorry, you broke up on my end.
sorry. My basically my number one like
You are
dream remake is
offline.
probably Sonic Adventure 1. I hope I
So
didn't break up that time.
yeah, oh, you came right back. So Sonic Adventure 1.
Yes. I freaking love that game as a kid, but it has aged like milk.
Wait, didn't what about Sonic Adventure DX? Is that still 1? Cuz I thought it
That's
was
still one, but that's just sort of an enhanced re-release that was made for the GameCube.
and then the Xbox 360 cuz if I'm not mistaken it's also there, right?
Yeah, it's basically DX is just what they have essentially ported to the GameCube, 360, Steam, what have you. And it basically just is the same game, except like the only like new feature there really is between them all is that the models look a bit shinier, just because you can do that with the GameCube but not the Dreamcast. And I think in the GameCube version you could transfer your Chow from the Chow Garden into your Game Boy Advance if you had like the link cable. So
Mhm.
I would want just a full blown remake of Sonic Adventure because you could very much tell that this was in the era of we're still experimenting with 3D graphics. We don't know what we're doing. I want to see that, but streamlined with some of the stuff, some of the stuff that's more staples to Sonic nowadays, with stuff like Generations and even Forces a little bit, with just like the different gameplay styles, just different like move sets to play around with. I think you could get away with like a lot of stuff like that. Plus, having a new Chow Garden, that would be freaking dope because for some reason Sega has never capitalized on giving us like a Chow Garden simulator or something. And on top of that,
When you say it like
typically
that,
this
I'm so surprised there's not a Chow Garden mini game. Like or I'm sorry, cell phone
Mhm.
game. Like, hey, download this, buy this stuff for your Chow.
I've been saying that for years. I would buy into a Chow Garden gotcha game, honestly.
Yeah.
But like just having all of that, and then typically I'd say also like we currently have like the best cast for Sonic the Hedgehog, right, but like Sonic, Amy, and Tails' voice actor have all basically confirmed that they're not playing the characters anymore. So I think just having
Mhm.
a new cast just to like test out how good they are as their characters in the remake, then obviously just have an option to go back to the old voice actors just to get that little piece of video game history of just bad dubs. But seriously though, Sonic Adventure and Genealogy of the Holy War, those are my two very different but at the same time games that I would just freaking love if they got remade. So, do you have an answer for this same question?
So I do, and mine's going to be very simple. I honestly like, and I think they've kind of hinted to it with E3 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful Joe. It was
Oh
a game
yeah.
series that I got as a kid. I rented it from Blockbuster. I got on the
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation 2 where you could get Dante, and I didn't quite understand what I loved about that game so much.
Mm-hmm.
But now as an adult, like I think that was actually like my first time I was like, oh my god, here's a combo, here's powers, here's how a good boss fight feels, where it's
Oh
not
yeah.
just like I played like a lot of Killzone, which I don't regret like liking first person shooters and now as an adult going back, but I Beautiful Joe, like as a kid, as an adult now, I'm like it still looks cool. The pink
Mm-hmm.
scarf accent, the fact that he just goes, it's like no. As an adult, there are days that I wish I could just be like,
Henshin a go
shift
go
into
baby.
turbo. Yeah, like shift into turbo. Like Power, like Sentai Rangers are still cool. Like I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like they still have powers. They can still punch through walls. I'll wear spandex if it means I get six pack abs.
Hell yeah.
Like it
Hell
was
yeah.
such a great series.
Mm-hmm. And I do kind of hope that stuff like the Wonderful 101 just ends up revitalizing that whole like henshin kind of like video game essentially that you got with like Beautiful Joe. Just because
And
like
it
it
did.
just has so much personality to it, you just can't not love it.
And I think it did. I think 101 has sparked something. I'm hoping the new one that came out is along those same lines there. But that,
Yes.
yeah, I would love to be able to go through that and like for myself and then for like the channel just to take the misses through like, hey,
Mhm.
here's something that's very silly, but you're gonna laugh and watch because it's gonna be so quirky in its in it
Mhm.
how it like takes itself nowadays, especially in the world that we're in where it's like superheroes are once again dominating, the
Oh yeah.
entertainment cycle. But we're at that hour mark, so I want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for
What
having
are you?
me.
Yeah. What are you up to, and where can we find you?
So basically, you can find me on Medium where I'm writing articles. By the time this comes up, I should probably be done with my latest article, which, believe it or not, is about remakes. Because latest one should be uh, called, and this is a working title, but I'm probably going to keep it because I love it. I'm remaking Pokemon Diamond and Pearl myself with blackjack and hookers, which is just which is just like all my ideas for like a potential Diamond and Pearl remake if I was just given the reins just from my perspective because I actually don't really like Diamond and Pearl at all. No hate, but
Hmm.
that I have my gaming news Discord server, Gaming News R, which is uh, I don't know, is that going to be like in the description or anything? I don't know how plugging works still.
I'll put it in there. I'll still have the Discord in there. Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, that's basically where you can find me. Read my articles, join my server to get like your regular gaming news updates and whatnot.
And I will
And
make
your
sure that
opinionated snark
that
from
we do
me.
that here. Um, I will, of course, have a link for Mark's Medium page down below, as well as more than likely a link to Gaming News R, making sure that the R has not changed to another letter at this time. Because I know you said you like to do that. Um, but yeah, and if you guys do like this, you can, of course, listen to this on all areas that podcasts can be found on. We are on Alexa, Google, iTunes, Spotify, as well as at Wrong Button on YouTube. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating and a thumbs up because it does help the podcast get noticed. Thank you again very much, Mark, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And remember that you guys are all winners out there. Keep it weird.